Hi, everyone, and welcome to Connected Learning TV. This is the second webinar in our October series with EdTech Teacher titled How to Be a Better Connector, Strategies for Educators, Parents, and Admins. I'm John Baraloni, the Community Manager for the Connected Learning Alliance, and I'm going to be our host for today. Throughout this month on Connected Learning TV, we're exploring how educators and parents and learning environment admins can support the principles and values of an approach to education that we call connected learning. And today we're chatting specifically about what parents need to know about encouraging their kids' peer-supported learning, whether it's online or offline. But before we dive into our chat, just let's go over a couple quick details as usual. To those who are watching us live right now, either on Google Plus or YouTube, we really welcome your comments and questions, especially via the Twitter hashtag for Connected Educator Month, that's CE14, or via this Google Plus event page. And we'll do our best to address your questions here in the Google Hangout. And we're also chatting throughout the month in the Connected Learning community on Google+. But before we start, I'd like to give our guests here a chance to briefly introduce themselves. So I'm just going to go from my left to right. And so Franklin, do you want to start us off? And you'll have to unmute yourself there.
Hello. Yes, hello. I am the South Boston Computer Clubhouse Coordinator. Also doing work around family creative learning with Rick Rose Roque from the MIT Lifelong Kindergarten group from the MIT Media Lab. And so what brings me to the table is we working with families and connecting with youth as how to engage in meaningful experiences around technology.
Awesome, thanks. And Patrick, you want to go next?
Thank you. My name is Patrick Larkin. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Learning in Burlington Public Schools in Burlington, Massachusetts. And the reason I'm here is because I think we try to overcome some of the perceptions that are out there about the use of social media tools, and parents are scared because some of this stuff is so far from their own experience, and I think it's our job in schools to make it less scary and actually show them how these things can be used constructively. So I'm very passionate about that and happy to be a member with this group tonight.
Thanks for joining us. And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Otts. I am on the community team and the moderation team for the Scratch online community, and also a longtime user of Scratch. I used it all through high school as well. So I guess I'm here because I care about the Scratch online community and how learning can happen online.
Thanks for joining. And Tanya, you want to close us out?
Sure. Hi, my name is Tanya Everett. I am currently on leave from the Lester B. Pearson School Board, where I was the lead teacher for educational technology and digital citizenship education. So I worked with schools and parents to help move technology and innovation forward. And a big part of what I did was community outreach and working with parents to educate them on not being fearful of technology, but how they can use it with their kids in a really productive way. And currently I work for EdTech Teacher and live in South Florida.
Awesome, and thank you all again in advance for taking some time out of your very busy days to share an hour of awesome insights and stories and energy with us. So one of the things I wanted to start off with is just kind of setting the stage a little bit. This phrase peer-supported learning might be a little bit new for some people. So I just wanted to get, in your own words, kind of each of you going down the line, what does good peer-supported learning look like to you or mean to you? Kind of what's an ideal peer-supported learning environment, do you think? And I'll just kind of let anyone jump in and we'll kind of popcorn after that.
Well, I mean, I think peer-supported learning is really giving ownership to students to sort of move forward with their learning. I think that's a big part of it, being able to collaborate, to work, and find, answers, not always have things, be given to them, and be able to discover through learning.
I think that's a great start, and I think the thing that overwhelms me for this question is, do we have to define what a peer is, first of all, because our definition of what peers are traditionally has been those kids sitting in the same classroom with us, and now I think we're going to get at the heart of some of that and some of the other questions down the road here. But a peer can be anybody that shares a passion with you, that you work together or learn together with. So I just think it's really exciting to expand that definition of what a peer is, and at the same time expand the possibilities of what we can do with those peers.
I agree. I also think that peer learning is also it's safe. It's being able to explore and express passions as well, and also problem solve as well from those that you feel safe around doing that with, and also there's a connection with. So it's not a task. It's more so an experience of like growth and learning at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say that peer-supported learning is something that's fun and that everyone, I think, benefits from in the relationship of someone, helping someone else and the person being helped.
So, in my experience, peer-supported learning starts a lot of the time with peers sharing some kind of common interest or passion or purpose in wanting to learn together. And a lot of the times it seems that kind of interest-powered learning, peer-supported learning, is happening outside of schools in spaces like libraries, museums, or after-school programs, or even online in learning communities. So this one is kind of more geared toward Patrick, since you're working more in the formal education space. How are you seeing peer-supported learning playing out in, for example, K-12 schools versus outside of school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the key, it comes a lot to, I think, the leadership of a school district and the school board and what the expectations are, because I think you can never get close to some of the things we're going to be talking about in regards to peer leadership if you're overly focused on standardized test scores and how are my kids doing on, that big high stakes exam. So I think, again, we have to be clear what our priorities are. We're big with inquiry-based learning and kids solving big problems, and I think some of that stuff lends itself naturally to peer learning, like learning with your peers, learning with others, and again, so I think it really comes down to what the district's philosophy is, and it's a tough time to really push some of this stuff depending on where you're working and what the priorities of the school or the school district are.
Fair enough. And Franklin, Tanya, anything to add in terms of that kind of dichotomy between in school and out of school peer-supported learning?
Well, I think there's definitely a huge disconnect in terms of what often happens in school and what happens out of school in terms of peer, support with their, I think that there's a lot of it happening, outside of school, but not necessarily always directed within the classroom. So I definitely think that there's probably a huge disconnect, not everywhere, but in a lot of schools in terms of being sort of connected and being able to provide support within, or give opportunities for students to have, the opportunity to provide support to each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I had from just working with certain members and students. Some of the stories that they bring back to me is that when they are in school, they're learning, but at the same time, when they're in a computer clubhouse, or they're in an after-school program, and they're doing engaging, fun, and exciting things. It's different. They say it's not like school. We're learning, but it's not like school. And when I hear that, one thing I do think about is, well, what's the environment? What's the atmosphere? What's going on that's creating this positive experience, or this positive feeling. So I would agree.
And Sarah, in your experience with the Scratch online community, and a little bit of background for those who might be hearing about Scratch for the first time, it's basically a way for kids, especially, to learn code. You're essentially putting coding blocks together, making sprites move. It's really fun, really easy. But there's a huge community surrounding this particular tool program too. So, Sarah, how are you seeing peer-supported learning playing out in this online community space where, normally you might think of, I'm just interacting one-on-one with this program, but there happens to be a community around. How does that work?
Oh, and I see it all over the place. I saw it when I first started using Scratch as a young teenager myself, and that's sort of what kept me scratching. Because the Scratch Online community allows you to share your projects with, everyone on the website, and then the other people on the website can comment on your projects and give you feedback, give you advice, help you out, etc. So when I first started using Scratch, I was really interested in making projects that were related to math, and I met some other users, some of whom were around my age and some were older, who were able to help me out and give me ideas, and then I was able to help them, and it was a really good relationship. But more recently, I've seen just, I guess, lots of examples, but recently we started a sort of, I guess, a team, an initiative on Scratch that allowed kids to designate themselves as helpers. So they were Scratchers who were particularly interested in helping out other Scratchers, and we see this happening all the time just organically on the website. But we decided to sort of formalize it like this. It got a lot of excitement from everyone and a lot of feedback and help given. It was really great.
That's awesome. So we've kind of covered a little bit of what peer-supported learning could look like in a few different ways, a few different environments. So I'd like to dig a little bit more now into kind of speaking to parents and adults and mentors who might be watching this either live or later. Kind of what are some of the common either challenges or fears specifically that parents might have about letting their kids go into these peer-supported learning environments, whether it's hanging out in a library after-school program with other adults and kids that they don't personally know, or trying to learn with other people and play with other people online. What are some of those common fears, and why does peer-supported learning seem so scary at times?
I think that there's a bit of maybe a bit of a disconnect in terms of what parents understand as being passive kind of screen time and creative, productive screen time. And I think that there's a lot of things that happen that come off or that we hear about that are very often really negative. And so I think that without sort of understanding what's going on and not sort of sitting down and exploring what's going on with our children, there's definitely a lot of, I guess, sort of a mystery to like what's really happening. So I think there's definitely that component to it.
I think a lot of it's, again, going back to this being something new. It's not something that parents experienced as learners themselves. So I think there's some fear involved too when you say my child is learning with strangers, or who are these people? How do I know what their background is and these types of things. So I think we really need to help parents see how this works. Like bring them in, show them their child operating in an online community that's based on something that they're passionate about, and why we feel comfortable with them interacting with these people. And again, depending on their age, what's the type of information they're sharing. I just think we kind of have to handhold parents and walk them through it so they get a better understanding of it. Because, I mean, ultimately, what does a parent want but their child to be passionate about something? So if we can help parents understand that this is okay and that we've done our homework, and show them how they can do the same work when it's summertime, or as the kid gets older, they can check up on their kids. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, Patrick. I also think that taking an action in curiosity. So what I mean by that is, for a parent, if there's this fear, let's give an example, there's a fear around Facebook, for instance, or at our clubhouse, like there was a fear around like YouTube, but there's many useful ways in which some of these technologies can be used for learning. So like taking, like with that curiosity, if where that fear lies, if action is there, I think that I'm just diving in with the child. Sometimes they may feel it's uncool, mom, dad, this is not cool, but still, I think that still a teenager or a younger person inwardly is thinking like, wow, if my mom or dad is interested in this, there's an implicit recognition, of that young person. So.
And that actually brings up one of my questions that I'd had kind of prior to this conversation that I definitely wanted to get each of your takes on. What would be kind of that healthy or good balance between a parent being, maybe a little too involved in how their child's learning, both, in school, out of school with peers, and then being maybe too hands-offish or maybe a little bit too naive about what their kid's doing? I mean, is there a good balance, or does it all depend on, the parent-kid relationship and a lot of other factors?
When I work with parents and I discuss about, issues surrounding working online, I think it's really important to sort of have a few kind of golden rules that are sort of made really clear between, children and their parents. And that is that the internet and the web, by the very nature of what it is not a private place. And it's not that there's not great things that happen, and it's not that we're trying to be fearful of what happens. But I think as a parent, it's really sort of it's really important to understand that what our children are doing online is important, and it's important that we understand what they're doing online. Not to say that they shouldn't do things. This is where they socialize and they make an understanding of their identity and how they're creating and how they're figuring out who they are, and that's fine. But it's really important that as parents we understand that that's not their private place. It's not the diary under their bed. It's the diary under everyone's bed. And so like if they're going to be learning on the web, it's really important that we understand what they're doing and that we're active. And I don't think we have to be overbearing, but I do think that we have to guide them and teach them how to use the technology appropriately and guide their process through that. So I think that it's really important to understand that we're not being overbearing, but we have to know we should know what's going on as parents.
I also think it's the demystification of technology, and I think that young people can play an integral role in demystifying some of these attitudes or relationships that parents do have with technology. Sometimes the parent may feel like they are the dinosaur in the room because technology is moving so fast. So again, that begs that question of how do I keep track of my child? How do I know what's going on? And then one thing that also came to mind was a connection. I think it all starts with the connection with the child, with a parent with their child. I think the deeper there's an understanding and there is that connection, I think the conversations around technology or whatever it may be it's easier to have.
That's a great point by Franklin. If technology can be a common thread for parents to share with their children, I think that's a huge piece of this, because we're trying to get parents and kids connected. Parents want to be connected with their kids. Honestly, to go back to the original question, I don't think there's enough knowledge from most parents that I know to even keep tabs on what their kids are up to online, especially middle and high school level. So anything, again, we can do to help bridge that gap, I think is good for both sides. And the way we try to phrase it from our standpoint in the school system is not to make it this scary thing, like not to give parents horror stories about things that could happen to their kids. We try to educate them and show them how they can use these resources constructively as well as their kids. But I really like that idea of bringing parents and kids together to use the technology. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've seen on the Scratch website some great things happening when parents and kids connect over Scratch. Just a little bit, like a kid might make a project and say like, "Oh, my mom gave me this idea to make this project," or "I made this project for my dad's birthday," or something like that. Or, I've heard of parents introducing their kids to Scratch or whatever. So I definitely think that I've seen some really successful things happen when parents get a little bit involved.
Yeah, it's also nice when the child can be the teacher of the adults, and that's another, if we can bring them together, it's a neat thing to see happen.
And that actually brings up talking about kids can sometimes be the teachers, or adults can sometimes be co-learners with kids. That brings me up this idea of what does a good, quote unquote, good mentor look like in a peer-supported learning community, and keeping in mind that it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to age at all. It doesn't have to mean mentor equals adult, but what are some of the characteristics of what we consider to be good mentorship?
I think for our students, it's somebody that understands what they're going through. I think like very often, I mean, especially if we're talking about if we're if we're sort of referring to what happens online, or connecting our peers. If they're looking for mentorship, I think that it's really important that the people that they turn to are people they can trust, but also people that can understand and relate what what that looks like. So I think that being relatable is really important.
Yes, I would definitely have to agree with that as well. That's one of the first words that popped in my mind, like being able to relate, and also follow through. What I mean by follow through is just not having someone that's gonna just give you a good pep talk, but someone that is you're going to be able to ask questions to, and someone who's going to provide like some sort of guidance, whether implicit or explicit. But I think like it definitely first starts with just being able to relate to this person, or there's something in you or that says, wow, I see part of myself in that person. There's something that I want to get to know him or her better, So that's
I'd say in an online space, it's someone who's welcoming and a little bit outgoing, so they're willing to go to the New Year's and help them out. And I'd say it's someone who doesn't have all the answers, but willing is willing to help figure them out and is enthusiastic in it.
And just to add more, I think that there's a certain level of vulnerability that exists, that has to occur between the people that are who's being mentored and the person that is mentoring. There has to be a level of vulnerability so that so that the connection can be genuine and it's not something that's just contrived or just there for the moment.
And Patrick, anything to add there in terms of, maybe teacher as kind of the mentor model and helping kids figure out, what they're interested in or connecting them to other peers? What are maybe some good mindsets or skill sets to have?
Again, the number one thing is just kids can tell right away if you really care about them. It's building that connection, finding some common ground, just reiterating what some of the others have said. Being genuine. The word vulnerable is awesome because that shows that you're genuine. You're willing to show a bit of yourself. It's just all the qualities that make great teachers. They connect with people. I think make for great mentors as well.
And again, kind of playing off this, formal education system versus informal learning environment dichotomy a little bit. We know that in a lot of K-12 schools, you're kind of naturally separated by age group. But again, kind of thinking with Scratch in mind as one of these online communities where people can come together just around an interest, there's no real obvious age segregation happening. It's kind of everyone's thrown in it together, and sometimes you can have a 10-year-old expert teaching a new 16-year-old user or something like that. So I wanted to get your guys' take on why you think it is that in informal or online learning environments, age segregation isn't a big deal. I mean, what's kind of the currency within these peer-supported learning networks? And Sarah, as kind of our resident expert, feel free to start us off here. I mean, why do you think age isn't really a big deal in the Scratch community?
Well, I think part of it is the technical reason that we don't show age and we don't encourage users to share it. So I think that age in general isn't a big deal in the Scratch community, although I mean it certainly comes up. I think that that results in these sort of, I guess, mentorship relationships that aren't necessarily like age-wise peers. It also results in kids learning things before they're supposed to. And I mean that in a good way. Like I've made, math tutorial projects about trigonometry, and I've had kids commenting, I'm only in the 4th grade, but now I know about trig. I'm going to tell my teacher. So I think that's just exciting because I think everyone's just excited to learn, and age doesn't matter so much. It doesn't matter if a 10-year-old is teaching you, and it doesn't matter if you're only 10 and you're not supposed to know about trig.
I think when someone is engaged and interested, and I think especially when our children are interested in what they're learning about, you know, they'll learn. It's like you learn. I think we all learn when we're in the right frame of mind to receive information. And if you're in the right frame of mind, and if your experiences align and you are engaged, then age is just, in that case, really just a number. And I think that's just the beauty about the online space and how we're able now to learn in ways that were unimaginable, 15, 20 years ago. So, so I think that, the engagement is huge, that the motivation is there to learn on your own.
I think knowledge is the currency when it comes to online, learning communities. Is like age doesn't matter. It's what you know, what you bring to the table. And then I think if you're involved in a community that you're passionate about and that is added value to your life, you want to work hard to add value back to that community. So I think it's just kind of that it works in a full circle that way. And again, age has nothing to do with it. It's about passion.
Yeah, I think it's also expression. Expression plays a huge part into it. Being able to I express yourself with technology, or just having like that attitude of like playfulness. But when I say playfulness, not like playfulness in the sense that like I'm going to like we're playing, that may be fine, but also playfulness in the sense that like, oh, I'm gonna tinker with this. Let's see how I can, like learn this and be engaged. I remember when I first started, when I wanted to learn how to build websites, I thought it was really cool. I thought the art was cool and things like that behind it. So again, that like how can I express myself? So I think that plays a role in it as well.
And out of curiosity, especially in online spaces, does that, you know, anonymity kind of play a factor as well? If you're not connecting with people, face to face, where it's easy to figure out, oh, you're a little kid, or oh, you're an adult, or maybe you're in another country. When it's anonymous, does that make it a lot easier for people to just connect based on common interest, common knowledge?
I would definitely say so. I think that it's also a way, like you not knowing, like someone who may have been 10 may have made this really cool project, and that's a way of like of recognition, like wow, like I can't believe that you made something like this. And it's another way of connecting, as opposed to like having any preconceived notion. Like you're online, and you're seeing, and someone, and there's this admiration that can happen. Um, I think so. I think that's a part in it as well. So
Yeah, definitely. Say it has something to do with it. I think because you don't realize initially like who you're talking to. All you know about a person is, I guess, what they're passionate about, which I think is a really great first thing to know about a person. So you might get to know some people on the Scratch website, and then only later through conversation realize, that your best friends on the Scratch website are, a teacher in India and a 12-year-old in Florida, and that's exciting, and I think it all has to do with it being anonymous.
I almost want to say like thank goodness for like these opportunities for like our students to be able to express themselves or learn about um, or have a community where they feel really like secure and comfortable to learn about things that they're really passionate about. Like I can't, I mean, I can just imagine like for some of these kids, maybe like this is something that they, that they go to school and they love to learn more about, but they're not in a position to continue that. And so I think that that element for them is really like I'm grateful that they'll have that opportunity to learn in that way.
So this is kind of one of those bigger questions that I don't know we'll be able to fully wrap our heads around, but hopefully kind of get some seeds thinking, especially as it relates to parents who might be thinking about how to evaluate what a good peer-supported learning system or environment looks like. What does, again, quote unquote, success look like in these kind of environments? Should a learner go in and figure out already like what their own goals are for whatever system or community they're a part of? Should there be maybe like publicly viewable goals everyone's working towards, or should it be maybe a little bit more organic and maybe kind of figure out how to apply things as you learn them?
I mean, personally, I think depending on the, what the the community that they're working in, look, what that goal of that common community is. But I also think that in this case, um, having their own goals, especially if we're looking at younger learners, to me makes a lot more sense. They're they're doing this out of self-interest, and I think like figuring out where they are and pushing them to be a bit more self-regulated is part of the process. So I think that is is probably, I mean, I would imagine is probably a really good idea. Someone might disagree with me, but that's my thinking.
No, I was going to say it's all of the above. That's the beauty of it. People can go in, and if they want to set up goals for themselves right off the bat, if they want to just go in and it's more of just a free time, I'm going to spend some time when I have it. That's the beauty of it, is it's whatever you want to put into it. I mean, I think that's my answer anyway. And again, it does play into not only the interest level of the person, but it also age can play into it as well.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the person and with the environment. I think on the Scratch community, there's a lot of, I guess, more organic learning goals going on. Like, we don't have full community goals. Some kids might set their own, or they might just come about so slowly. Like if someone comes in, they really like cats, they learn, oh, I want to learn how to draw cats, they learn how to draw cats, and then, oh, I want to learn how to animate the cat, and they animate the cat. I want to learn how to make a game with the cat. So just like goals that come along just through some sort of passion that they have.
And Franklin, for your computer clubhouse kids, what does good learning look like? What does successful learning look like? Do you guys have goals that you're setting for them, or milestones, or is it just kind of all organic?
It's a mixture. I think it's a bit of everything that has been said here. I think that there's some members do come in with goals, and some members it just forms out of it's first just asking the questions like what are your interests, what are you passionate about, and from there I think that their drive to want to achieve goals in what they want to do happens. So we have family creative learning. So with that, some members may want to see how they can connect the physical and the virtual world together. How do I make that happen, and how can I do that with this weird thing called the makey, and how can I have a spoon and still make a piano, and I can use bananas and make sounds. Whoa, this is driving me crazy. This is crazy. So it's really based off of just their interests and their passions. So when a member first comes in, my first question is what is it that drives you crazy? Like what are you interested in? From there, that's how they're able to really sift out like what goals they want to achieve, in that space. But it's really, I really see it as like a safe haven for them to explore and express, and then that's how the goals come out organically.
So I know that kind of within this learning process, reflection seems like it's a pretty core part. I mean, kind of have to look at how far you've come and what you've learned. And I was just wondering, in each of your own respective experiences, is reflection something that's happening naturally, that the learner kind of engages in reflection themselves, or is that more of a role for the adults and the mentors in the space to kind of engage that reflection process?
I think it's happening all across the board. I think it's happening with adults and mentors. I think it's happening with peers. I think reflection happens all the time. I see that with my members when a member is able to teach another member how to use a tool, like how to use Photoshop, or how do I get how to animate a sprite, and they don't need to ask. They call me Mr. O. They don't need to ask Mr. O how to program something on Scratch. So there's that reflection there of like, well, this was taught to me, and now I can also share that, which goes back to peer connected learning. So I think that there's always a reflection that does happen. And also in their conversations, sometimes it's like I'm a fly on the wall, and I'm listening, and they're talking about, well, I developed this project, and how that connected to another. So it's just I think that it happens a lot.
And I have to say, I think from my experiences, working in schools, I'd love to see a lot more reflection happening in terms of how we look at assessment and how we have our students regulating their learning in school. I mean, there's definitely pockets, and it's happening more and more, but I think very often there's a lot of reflection and a lot of learning that happens outside of school that when they come into, when they come back to school, sometimes it can get kind of lost with the kind of assessment that they're required to do. So like I think that there's, I'd love to see a bit more of a connection between, our students being much more self-regulated and reflective, and in their actual, like, schooling environment, and not just it happening, when they're outside of school, when they're, on social media or social networks, or learning, or peer learning, or in, communities where they are getting that kind of really valuable feedback. So I definitely would love to see more of that.
I think any place where you find individuals or learners are doing something significant, whether it's in school or out, there's a whole lot of reflection going on. The question is it something that we ever see? Is it something that's, just reflection, I'm reflecting right now, or is it somebody actually documenting the experience? Because one of the neatest things for me is, like, just for example, going to an art show that we have at the high school and not looking at the works that the kids created as much as reading their reflections about the process. And I think, again, if we can encourage that, it's hard because we ruin everything in school. Like, all right, we're going to mandate reflection, reflection's going to stink then, and nobody's going to want to do it. But if we can get, kids to be, self-regulate and reflect and find out the meaning in that, and then share it, that's almost more meaningful than the end product that they come up with, because it's something they can use wherever they go afterwards.
Well, I mean, I'd like to piggyback on that, because I think that if we change the purpose that we're asking them to reflect, like if there's a real authentic purpose to your reflection, and you actually have like a connected audience and like a reason for why we're reflecting, and it's not just for like a grade, or like it's not going to just be showcased on like the school wall and no one's ever going to see it, then I think that maybe like the reason for reflection, I think that like our children who are like out of school and are reflecting and like are, on DeviantArt or or on Wattpad, they're published authors are reflective on their work and are getting really critical feedback on their publications, and they're reflecting because they actually have an authentic audience. So I think that piece is really important, like to have an authentic reason and to create and make an authenticity is what really makes this type of learning exciting and real and like why we want to be doing this. So I hope that we don't I like that you mentioned like that we are mandating it, because it's so true. Like we mandate it and we like school the love of learning out of these kids.
I think that there's, when I think about reflection too, I think of being explicit and validation. I feel that sometimes learners can be learning things and they're doing these amazing things and not even know it. But then from there, if it's explicit as to like really like think like why, like what was your process of going through this? How did that what brought you to make those certain decisions, and then I think that it aids in validating their work. It aids in validating their identity in a sense. So I think that so being explicit and definitely it helps.
Yeah, just to go off of all of that, I'd say there is a lot of reflection going on Scratch, and I think because there is an audience that the kids care about, and they care about what they made. And every Scratch project, when you share it, there's a side panel that allows you to type in the instructions for what you made, as well as something called the notes and credits. So it asks, how did you make this project? Did you use idea scripts or artwork from other people? So that's just a space that a lot of Scratchers use to, talk about where they got the idea for making their projects, what they learned while making their projects. I've seen a lot, some Scratchers saying things like, "Oh, this is the first time I've ever used the vector editor. That's one of the paint editors we have," or "This is the first time I've ever used this cloning function," or whatever. Or also sometimes they'll reflect on things they haven't learned yet. So I'm still figuring out how to do this. So I think there is a lot of reflection going on in Scratch, and I think it is because of the audience and because it's explicitly a field that they can fill in.
That's a great point, Sarah, and that actually brings up segues really nicely into another question that we had kind of before we started this conversation. We know that personal reflection is especially important during the learning process, but in these particular environments or communities that are really based on collaborating with peers, peer feedback and peer review can be really helpful as well. So again, just kind of thinking in mind, if you're talking to adults or parents and they're trying to figure out what is peer-supported learning, what makes peer-supported learning good for their kids, in again your respective experiences, what is a good feedback system within a peer-supported learning environment? I mean, obviously we don't want it to be 100% positive, 100% negative. So how do you ensure that peer feedback is good and effective?
I think it's really, really important as part of teaching our students how to be literate in 2014 that we're teaching them how to provide critical feedback and criticism in all forums, but especially in online forums. And I think that that's something that has to be taught. I don't think it's inherent, and I think it's really important to sort of distinguish the difference between being hurtful and being critical or being constructive. And so I think as a parent, and especially as an educator, that's part of how we have one of sort of the literacies that we need to address with our children in terms of how they are being constructive in how they provide feedback, which is also part of the reflective process, right? And it sort of ties nicely within the two.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff written about false praise and how it's useless, and so just again, I mean, we work with teachers on the same thing. Just to say it's great or that's awesome, it's meaningless to the person on the other end. So, and again, I think it comes down to when people get involved with some of the work, whether it's the Scratch community or something else similar, you want constructive feedback because it makes you better ultimately, and that's what you're there for, to get better, to learn more. So again, I think Tanya's right on with that's got to be a basic skill that we teach all of our kids, and it's not being mean when you say something that might be a little bit negative. It's actually, that's the person you want to spend more time with because they're going to make you better, because they're willing to give you constructive feedback.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Tony and Patrick. I think that also just honesty, on honesty, and being able to then throw it back on the learner. Well, like how, like to give that. What else are you going to do with this? How else is this going to be iterated? How far can you take this? Does it just die here? Is it still going to go on? So I think giving it back to the learner again to iterate, I think is crucial as well.
Yeah, in the Scratch community, we do a lot to try to encourage them to give constructive feedback to each other. I think one of the most important things we do is just try to do it by example, by leaving constructive comments ourselves. That's honestly, I think that I learned the art of giving constructive feedback through being a user on Scratch and seeing other users' comments. So that's, I think, a lot of it is just showing by example.
That's awesome thoughts, everybody. And hard to believe, but we're a few minutes out from the top of the hour here. So I'm going to move us into our final question before I kind of go down the line and get final thoughts from everybody. But I always like to end things on a bit of a positive note if we can. So I'm wondering if any of you have very specific stories in mind of where you saw peer-supported learning going great, or somebody getting kind of an aha moment in a peer-supported learning environment or community, and just kind of pulling from, again, your respective experiences. So whoever would want to jump in on that one, feel free.
I mean, just from working with students over the last few years, and just sort of seeing the informal learning that happens when you're not structured, it gives them, when they're able to sort of have an opportunity to learn online, and ask questions that you might not have ever imagined that would come up in the class, or the way that they're able, like I've seen students that would never say 3 words, learn and express themselves, or share their thinking in an online forum that completely blew my mind. So I think that just having that opportunity for them to be able to have a voice in a place that they feel secure, I think is really important, and I think that having that online space is if used well, is really productive for them.
We had a group of middle school students last year that actually developed they printed a hand for a student that had lost his hand, a young man. And the thing that was amazing to me was, once they got into it, they didn't realize how willing people would be to help them and support them in that work. They got into an online community called Enable, and found all kinds of plans to print hands. They ended up connecting with somebody in Asia that had some type of string that was better to use to help close the fingers. It wouldn't stretch out, the material that it was made from. And just to see the look on their faces when they were able to pull off this work because they found the right community to help them in this venture. And anything they needed, there are people, again, literally from all over the globe that were willing to help them with that project. And then obviously to see the student come in and get fitted for that hand and to try it out was just an amazing thing. So that's the best example I have.
We had a workshop in our family creation, which we call Scratch Family Night, which there was, we started off with this parent who had really little to no technological experience, and it was just great to see lots of role reversal from the child teaching the parent. But then at the end of this 5-week process, the parent was able to flourish and really create projects and really be excited using Scratch, and that was just really great to see her do, to be completely averse from technology, hey, I don't know anything about this, I'm just here for my child, to she being the motivator, she being a kid at heart in expressing herself with technology, and I thought that was a really great moment to see.
With 3 million users on the Scratch website, I'm sure there are millions of examples of things going on. But I thought of one story that is peer-supported learning sort of across age group. Over the summer, we had a community initiative that encouraged Scratchers to make characters for other Scratchers to use in their projects. So I saw one great story of a young girl made a set of sprites, a set of characters with a made up animal, and she explained what it was. She got some nice feedback from some constructive criticism from some other users on the website. She made some changes, added some different costumes, some different looks to these characters, and then a teenage boy came along and asked if he could use her sprites in a project he was making, and asked permission to change certain things, and then developed this pretty sophisticated project using her characters. So this was sort of just multiple examples of peer-supported learning through constructive criticism and through collaboration.
Those are great stories, everybody. Really appreciate you sharing those with us. So we'll kind of, again, go down the same line that we started out in the beginning, and gonna kind of put you guys on the spot here. Final thoughts. What would be your extremely quick, short elevator pitch to a parent about why they should get their kid a little bit more involved in a peer-supported learning community or environment, even if it's the same environment or community that you're a part of? So Franklin, you want to start us off?
Yeah, definitely. I would my pitch to a parent would be to not focus on fear. I think to just focus on more so exploration, focus on more so expression, and also the passion and the interest that lies there within your child, and how technology can be used to just further that. That would be my piece of it, my 2 cents, so to speak.
That's great. Thanks. And Patrick?
I think all the stuff I'm reading is telling me that the kids nowadays are going to have multiple jobs they're going to go through in their careers. We're not in a world where you're going to prepare to work one job your whole life. So people that learn how to connect with others and learn new things are the ones that are going to be relevant, going to be able to transform themselves when it's time to change careers. And people that are one-dimensional, I think, are going to be in for a hard time. And again, I hopefully won't say it as scary as that, but just to encourage parents, like this is a 21st century skill that you must have. You need to know where to go to learn what you need to learn when you need to learn it. And there's all kinds of groups out there. If you know how to find them, if they can do it with Scratch, they can do it with one thing. They can replicate that later on when they need to. So it's critical.
Well said. Thanks. Sarah?
I'd say that, speaking personally, peer-supported learning changed my life through getting involved in the Scratch Online community and meeting these peers and getting help from my peers and making friends. I found a passion for computer science, and I'm majoring in it, but I also learned so many other things that I wouldn't have learned elsewhere. I learned about, how to use image editing tools, or how to advertise my projects, how to communicate with people online, all of these things. And I found a passion for this community that, now that I'm moderating and helping out with it more, I'm still involved in. So I'd say that peer-supporting learning is great because it's really fun and it can lead to awesome things, awesome passions.
That's great, Sarah. Going down the rabbit hole is not a bad thing. And Tanya, you want to round us out?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say in 2014, our kids are online anyways. They are doing things online, and I would much rather teach them and have them harnessing the power of the web in a positive way, where they're learning how to have information come to them, how to seek out information, how to connect and network themselves, and how to have an authentic audience. So the real question is, why wouldn't they be? Why do I even need to convince you? This is what's happening now, and you better embrace it or you're going to be left behind.
Fair enough. Well, that brings us to the end of this particular conversation, and it's been really enlightening and fascinating. So thank you, everyone. We're going to have a full video recording of this up immediately on www.connectedlearning.tv, and a lot of other curated content on the way that you guys can share with your networks and communities. And this wraps up our second webinar of this month-long series, but that doesn't mean our conversations just have to end or pause here. We encourage everyone to get involved in the ongoing conversations on Twitter, especially this month with Connected Educator Month using the hashtag CE14, and hopefully you'll also go and make some new friends in the Connected Learning Google Plus community. And if you'd like to know more about the upcoming webinars in this series with EdTech Teacher, please visit either www.edtechteacher.org or www.connectedlearning.tv and sign up for the email newsletters there. And we'll hope that you'll all join us again next Tuesday, October 21st at this same start time of 5 p.m. Pacific, that's 8 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to chat about what school admins can do to support digital media heavy, production-centered learning in their own schools. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it.